Attachment styles. I thought this was pretty interesting to see how nature and nurture play a role in this. So, Ainsworth and Bell defined attachment as an affectional tie that one person or animal forms between himself and another specific one, a tie that binds them together in space and endures over time. Parental behaviors can affect neuronal processes occurring in brain development of a child. So, in an article that I found, they provided a really good case illustration or like an example of how this works. So, they say that picture an individual growing up in a home where the father works and the mother stays home with the baby. This is a violent home where the father engages in violent behaviors toward the mother. The mother, which is the subject of the violence, is depressed. She displays depressive behaviors like depressed mood, excessive crying, disengagement from others, lack of energy, and apathy toward others, and pleasant situations. When anticipating the father's return home from work, the mother becomes hyper aroused and displays anxious behaviors. So things like increased heart rate and breathing, increased irritability, increased motor behaviors, and also restlessness. The behaviors displayed by both parents mutually affect one another. The father returns home from work and feeling the tension in the home, he also becomes tense. He acts on his stress with physical violence towards the mother. This reinforces the mother's depressed mood and anxious behaviors. Um, so it's just kind of this loop of feedback that keeps this whole thing going. These interactions with the system lead to a sort of established pattern of attachment. Initially, the infant would cry to attract the attention of the mother, but the mother was not consistently responsive to the infant's distress, just because she doesn't have the energy to give the attention that the infant needs for a secure attachment to develop. So the infant learns that consistent caregiving is not going to happen, and so they decrease attention seeking behaviors. Based on the interactions with the mother, the infant develops an anxious avoidant attachment style. Furthermore, witnessing the mother's mood, the infant learns that displays of depressive symptoms are the normal thing. The infant also observes the stress response shown by the mother when anticipating the father's return home, and so the baby learns to fear the father. The baby feels hyper-aroused stress response from both parents, leading to the physical violence as well. And then I think this part was really interesting. It says, as an infant and toddler, the right hemisphere dominates the thought process. So left hemisphere logic is not present. The right hemisphere and the limbic system are responsible for emotions, emotion regulation, and emotional memories. The interactions between the individual, or the baby, and the caregivers influence the development of the brain, including the psychological health of the baby. So the baby is witnessing depressed mood and a lack of positive emotions, so they will not as easily display positive emotions because those emotions were not prominent when emotional learning initially occurred. Also, the baby is witnessing and experiencing a hyper-aroused stress response on a regular basis. Similar to when we exercise on a regular basis and our muscles strengthen, the connections between the neurons associated with anxiety and hyperarousal will strengthen. This makes it easier for the individual or the baby to go into an anxious state. It doesn't really matter whether or not this anxious response is appropriate for whatever situation they're in. Also, because these patterns were established in the brain during development, it's harder to break these patterns later in life and integrate new patterns. So, the behaviors of both the mother and the father have a big influence on how that child will grow up to be with their style of attachment. And usually attachment style is something that remains stable throughout life. So however you were as a kid, that's probably gonna be exhibited also as an adult. But this case illustration, or like the example that I just gave, it shows how it's both nature and nurture intertwined with this. Because the nurture side of it, or like the environment that that baby is in, it actually affects like biological, or I guess like physiological processes that are going on in the brain. So that makes it like a nature, that like a nature side to this. And then just contemporary views of the debate now. Um, so in earlier years, the debate was more about, is it nature or nurture? Like, it's only one, but obviously today most experts agree that it's both nature and nurture playing a role in the development of psychological characteristics. Um, Epigenetics. So this is an emerging area of scientific research that shows how children's experiences affect the expression of genes. And so during development, the DNA that makes up our genes, it accumulates chemical marks that determine how much of a gene is actually expressed. This collection of marks is called the epigenome. The different experiences that children have will rearrange these chemical marks. So this explains why genetically identical twins can still have different behaviors and skills and health issues, I guess. It's because of the differences in the epigenome. So this means that the old idea that genes are set in stone has been disproven. It's not really nature versus nurture anymore, because now we know that it's really both acting. Um, they both play a big role in the development of psychological traits. Um, Epigenetics explains how early experiences can have lifelong impacts. The genes that a kid inherits from their parents provides information that guides their development. So an example is like how tall they could eventually become, or the kind of temperament they could have. When experiences during development rearrange the epigenetic marks that control that gene expression, they can change whether and how these genes release the information that they are carrying. So the epigenome can be affected by positive experiences like supportive relationships, or negative influences like environmental toxins or stressful life circumstances. These leave a unique signature on the genes. These signatures can be temporary or permanent, and both types affect how easily the genes are switched on or off.